Hi folks, Josh Knight the First here with another episode of Writer Rebuild, coming to you with episode 30 of the series. Let's get right into it. So this week on Kamen Rider Build, we are effectively 3/5 of the way through the series, and we're still getting a lot more information about the plot in this episode, but we're getting that served with a lot more comedy than I thought we would get this episode, but we still have to see about the writers getting out of the dire straits they're in at the end of last episode, so let's go ahead and pick up where we left off. So as we saw at the end of last week's episode, Vernage, the Queen of Mars, has made her appearance and made her presence formally known to everybody. Now right away we see that Bloodstark has a lot of animosity towards her, recognizing her and trying to kill her all very quickly. But this is done away with very quickly as we see that Vernage still has the ability to go ahead and move matter, but she apparently can also teleport as she gets all of our riders to safety. But that isn't before Bloodstark is able to get one good hit in, and of course that hit was blocked by Ryuga, who unfortunately sacrificed his powers and ability to transform in the process. Now Ryuga is a big portion of the focus in this story, and he kind of has been for the entirety of the Build storyline, and we'll get more information on that and subsequently in next week's episode. But it's worth noting that they're sowing the seeds right now for what's going to be a pretty big payoff over the next episode or two. Now back at the cafe, Vernage tells us a little bit more about what's going on, confirming that Evolt, this word that she's been saying, is actually in reference to a person or a being or something that used the power of Pandora's box to destroy Mars however long ago it was that happened. And of course she's there to try and stop that from happening now. Now the reference to Ryuga not knowing who he is, saying, oh, you need to become Hope, you will become Hope, again is feeding into this idea that Ryuga has a lot more going on than we're all aware of. Now what I find interesting about the beginning portion of this episode is that everything that you're told in the first 5 minutes is immediately recapped when they go underneath into Build HQ proper, and this is all done through puppets. The really odd but fitting thing about this episode is actually the use of comedy. Usually over the last couple of years with Kamen Rider, I've been a bit off-put by the kind of comedy they've been adding into the shows. Some series lend themselves a bit more to comedy, like say Kamen Rider Den-O, but from that point onward it would seem that comedy seemed to be much more at the forefront of the kind of stories they were trying to tell, at least in my opinion. But here the comedy is actually serving the purpose of moving the plot forward. The way the writers are bantering amongst each other as they're trying to decide what exactly it is Vernage is about is actually really fitting and actually very funny. Much the same, the use of the dolls, which wasn't necessary at all, but is used to recap everything you just were told over the last 5 minutes, or really the last 29 episodes, is very ingenious, and I actually like the way that worked. But getting past that point, we're seeing that Ryuga still has something that we don't quite know about, and I appreciate that the way they did that was a callback to episode 2 when he was talking about him being born. Aside from the reference to episode 2 and his birth, we see that there's a lot more about Ryuga that we didn't know. Granted, we haven't gotten a lot of character development out of him or backstory since the beginning of the series, but we find out that his parents died when he was 10 years old. Again, the whole thing with dead parents in a Rider series. Oh, it's so original. But what's interesting about this is that thinking about this and saying that he doesn't really remember it well, but it was a hard time for him, during this it seems that the Dragon Splash Jelly, which was of course damaged during that fight with Bloodstark, kind of melts into this new bottle, which we'll see more of at the end of the episode. Now I noticed that the bottle kind of melted itself. It wasn't some energy coming out of Ryuga, it was just a response to how he was feeling. So I don't think anything's particularly special about him, but there is something special about the things that are surrounding him, which I think they'll answer more about in the coming episode. Now another important piece of information that we're given is that Vernage tells everybody that her time is limited, her soul will eventually waste away. Unfortunately, Bloodstark does know this, and he's not concerned about it. Really, this seems to all be fitting into some sort of plan that Bloodstark's had since the beginning, and it seems like we're finally getting a piece of what exactly it is that plan is. Now as far as Nanba Heavy Industries is concerned, they've been kept in the dark by Bloodstark the entire time, and really at this point it doesn't really matter because it's revealed to us that Nanba's plan is just basic old world domination, and it's not like we haven't seen that in a Rider series before out of our villains, but they're not going to be the end boss. That's just kind of something we're having to get past so we can actually see what Bloodstark's end goal is going to be. The other thing that's interesting to note about that is that Gintoku is now finally starting to have reservations. Maybe that battle that he had a couple of weeks ago with Build finally woke him up to realize, hey, maybe there's more going on than just my feelings about things. We see that he's starting to question both Utsumi, Bloodstark, and maybe a little bit of Nanba, lurking in the background and thinking about, hey, this isn't what I signed up for. And there's even more reason for him to question that when we realize that Bloodstark isn't exactly who we thought he was this entire time either. Well, not exactly, because I kind of theorized this at the end of last week's week's episode, but now we're getting confirmation here. That voice we've been hearing when Isurugi transforms into Bloodstark seems to be an alternate personality altogether, much the same as Misora. The heavy money right now is that this is Evolt, the being that Vernage was referring to this entire time that used Pandora's box to destroy Mars in the first place. So this opens up an even bigger can of worms and even bigger questions, in that since Misora has this bracelet that seems to hold Vernage's soul, what is the item, what is the thing that Isurugi is holding on to that potentially holds the soul of Evolt on him? That answer we're not going to get right away. We still have to deal with what's going on right now. So everybody knows that there's a time crunch. Vernage doesn't have a lot of time, and of course Bloodstark is getting closer to his goal. So Sento has to act, and he has to act now. Unfortunately, doing things politically like he has been having to do the last couple of episodes, he needs to be smart about this. And I do appreciate that the way he decides to handle this is a payoff referring to last week, specifically when he borrowed that doll arc from the Prime Minister. And kind of a roundabout way of doing this, borrowing the doll arc and not giving it back is tantamount to treason, and because this is treason, Kamen Rider Build, Sento, can be disavowed from the government. If he's not officially an agent of the government, if he acts on his own, it doesn't reflect on anybody, meaning that he can act on his own to get Pandora's box back from Sato. Once the Prime Minister realizes that this is what Sento's plan is, he contacts Ryuga and Sawatari and gives them instructions on getting back the doll arc that he took, as well as getting back Pandora's box from Build if Build gets a hold of it. See, it's that kind of workaround that allows them to do what they need to do and actually fills out this idea of fighting in a different way that Build was talking about last week. And I appreciate that all of this rounds out all of these open threads that were left open last week, and really the same thing goes with the comedy at the beginning of the episode. They're really filling out the story. And I know this is a lot of words to get to a point of actually being happy with the episode, because not only am I happy with the storytelling, I'm happy that we saw bike action here. Now granted, it doesn't last for a while, but at least they remember that he has a bike and he uses it to ride in against the Hard Guardians, who we now see do have that same ability that the original Guardians had to transform into a larger kind of tank version of themselves. Now in fighting the Hard Guardians, we do see the return of classic Cross, which I really do like that design much better than Cross Charge. Now of course the reason for this being that Cross Charge was destroyed because both the Splash Driver and the Jelly were destroyed at the beginning of the episode, so I'm kind of happy that we're not going to see that form again here in the series. I gotta have my preferences. And once the Hard Guardians are taken care of and the three riders get inside of Pandora's Tower, we're treated to another fight between them and two Hard Guardians and the Hell Brothers. Now I was wondering about if we were going to see more interesting camera work, and the answer is yes. This week we did see some more. A lot of interesting perspectives, a lot of zoom-ins on the riders, very artistic stuff, at least as far as a show like this is concerned. It would be very easy to just film it as basic as possible, but here they actually took the time to show us interesting angles. Now we're also seeing that even though the writers seem to have the upper hand, Bloodstark can't have that, and he's using Pandora's box to manipulate the tower and kind of is able to construct whatever he wants within the tower itself. So he's trying to restrict them, trying to use lasers. Where the lasers came from, I have no idea. It's Martian technology, I'm not going to worry about it right now. The interesting thing to see here is that Cross is actually going to be proven effective, even though technically this is a downgrade for him going back to his original form, but going back to that bottle we saw in the middle of the episode that the Jelly transformed into, Sento was able to make a new device for Cross to use called the Cross Magma Knuckle. Now as he states, the knuckle wasn't fully tested yet, so it's good for a weapon right now, but it's more evocative of this idea that we just don't know how high in power that Cross can get. And these answers will probably come up in next week's episode as we see that it was discovered by Sawa that Ryuga might not be human after all. Whether or not he is will be answered next week, along with seeing this full-on new power-up for him, Cross Magma. So I really gotta hand it to him. In this episode, I was equally entertained in both the fights and the storytelling, which actually relied a lot on comedy, but wasn't stupid. You could kind of take it that way in kind of the little asides between Sawatari and Ryuga and Sento, but at the same time, they were still pushing the narrative forward. They're theorizing about what's actually going on. It's not just funny for funny's sake like some other shows can be. And at the same time, everybody got a piece of this episode. We saw just about all the characters there. In fact, all the characters were there, which is the first time that's happened in ages. So I'm really satisfied with the way the show is going. I know we're well past the halfway point at this point, and we're going into that third quarter with the power-ups that have to come along with the end of the series, and I really like that I'm enjoying it this much. I remember back when the show started, I remember asking, please be good, please be good, please be good, and it's doing that, and much more. But those of course are my thoughts in the episode. I want to hear what you guys thought in the comments below, so let's go ahead and talk about a few things. First off, Evolt. Now that we see that Evolt seems to be possessing Isurugi, what do you think is the item that Evolt's soul is contained in? Secondly, Gentoku. Now that he's starting to question Nanba Heavy Industries and Bloodstark's plan in general, do you think he'll actually side with the good Kamen Riders later on in the next couple of episodes? And thirdly, the bike action. Do you think we deserve more bike action at this point in the series, or it's fine that we're focusing more on fights and forms? You tell me in the comments below. And of course, during the week, you can always talk to me over on social media. On Twitter, I'm at JoshKnight1st. This has been episode 30 of Rider Rebuild for episode 30 of Kamen Rider Build, The Truth of Pandora's Box. I'm Josh Knight the First. I'll see you guys again next episode.